Hey, everybody. Today we have the special guest, the legendary caster who now works at the esports score, Sebdot. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm doing good. It's been a crazy but really wonderful week, both in Rocket League and out. I'm very excited to see where OG goes. As being able to cast the run, it was an amazing time. And then finally, at the score, we're starting to do some Rocket League content again, which is making me so happy.
Yeah, me too. And I saw they put out that thing on Zen. I was just like, yes, they're finally talking about us again.
We're doing it. We're doing it. It's
Yeah.
finally happening.
Yeah. So I guess let's start out. How did you get into Rocket League?
So I got into Rocket. Okay, so I played Rocket League for the first time in like 2015. I was in university, and basically I would go to parties every week because I was a very responsible lad, and I stayed in school. I did. I graduated, but I was a responsible lad in university, and one of our friends would always like after the party wind down, we would always play like some sort of game. And the two games that we would always play, his name was Spencer, was Rocket League and Super Smash Bros. Melee. And those were my introductions to the two games that would take over my life for the next, oh God, 8 years now. So that was my introduction to Rocket League. I didn't get into it in a big capacity until I started probably working at the score, and after having put in a bunch of hours into the game already. I had met LeafX through events that I was working in on the Smash side of things. And basically a friend of mine who came in, he was really introducing me to the whole pro scene. I knew Brody was into it at that time. But he was like, yeah, dude, like, Cloud9 is super sick. What is it? iBuyPower was like super sick, and all these Canadian heroes and whatnot. That was basically my intro, and then I just kind of stuck with it ever since. I shifted from what was CS:GO, which was my main like esport as like a viewer and like CC, to Rocket League completely because it just took over my life.
Nice. So what's the highest rank you've hit?
Um, C3.
Hey,
I
one
have
higher
been.
than me.
I am a hard stuck solo queuer that only solo queues, so it has been hell on earth for me.
Oh, dude, like I hate solo queuing.
It's so bad. It's so
Yeah,
bad.
it's like man, like trying to get on the same page with somebody who's watched a YouTube video of some grand champ that may or may not actually understand the game, and they're
Exactly,
like,
right. And I'm not gonna say like
yeah,
I'm a great player. There are people that I've played with that they would say either A, I'm really smart, or B, but I'm mechanically just like brain dead. I just
mhm,
mechs are just so low. But then there's the odd pearl, okay, where you
yeah.
just paop off and you're like, wow, Seb is a genius.
Yeah, I either get you have no understanding of the game, which is funny considering we just made RLCS, uh, or I get like, oh, you're smurfing, and it's like it's such a weird space right now in like the solo queue world.
Yeah, because everyone assumes that if you're a solo queue, you're either A, smurfing, B, are just hard stuck, or like C, you're just, goofing off kind of thing or trolling, which happens all the time, to be honest.
Yeah,
I am the biggest like smurf caller outer. I blame all of my opponents that are better than
mhm,
me at a inordinate level as being smurfs, but I will never admit it to myself. So
yeah. So you said you also played Melee quite a bit. That was
yes.
Melee was the first esport I really got into, or actually it was a Smash Four, and then I was just like, oh, like let me like historic Smash moments, and I was just like, wait, that's how fast Melee is, and that's hooked from then on.
Yeah, it's an easy game to get under you, really can take you by the heels, just run away with you. Yeah, Melee was the first game that I think well, I should say that I've been like in esports, like around esports and watching different esports for like a very long time. I would go to LAN cafes back in my hometown and play like CS Source a lot of the time. To those of you who don't know, that game is probably older than you if you're a Rocket League player. So like CS Source, Quake, Old Crisis, so like a lot of FPS games, and I played COD competitively back in the day. Um, But Melee in like my adult years was like definitely the game that really took hold of me in a way that hadn't really done it before, where it's like it was an obsession to the point where I wanted to play competitively. Because thankfully in Toronto,
Hmm.
we have a very, very close knit community of like competitive players. So like Moki is from here, Zuppy is from here, Mateo's from here, Sunsei is a bit further out, but like he's around. And so a lot of us like knew each other in some kind of way because we would all go to each other's tournaments. Now I went to Ryerson University at the time. It changed to Toronto Metropolitan University, but Ryerson University at the time, and we ran one of the main weeklies that would happen in Toronto. So people would come, all the top ranked players would come from around the region to our weekly, generally week in, week out. And then if GOML comes around, which is Get On My Level, that's
Hmm.
Canada's super major, then all the top players would come out. So we had like AMSA, Mewtwo King, and whatever come out. And it was so enthralled by Melee, the speed, the mechanics, the progression, the really like tic-tac-toe of things, or like the chess of it, if you will. You know, getting into it, it was such a bewildering experience because I didn't realize it was like a rabbit hole. It was like Alice in Wonderland. Like you don't know how deep it goes until you actually get into it. You get initiated from the Smash documentary by Samox. So
Yes.
you watch that. You're like the moment you say, "And now he will try," and then it just you know, like just completely opens a world. So Melee's always been like my pocket. I love it to death, and I still commentate GOML,
Hmm.
you know, whenever I can, and I still try and take part, you know, in my community as much as I can. I'm still connected with all my friends that I made from the community. Yeah, I love Melee Death. That game is just I recommend anyone play it. Get your hands on a controller, do whatever you can to play it because it will take over your life.
Yeah, make sure you spend at least $400 on your controller though, and get Firefox and Wave Dash
I
notches.
got a box. I also I've dude I'm also using my AirPress.
Mhm.
My controller crisis and my character crisis is something to behold. You know, I have
Who's
a
your
box.
main?
I'm a Puff main,
Okay.
but but I think I went through about 10 different characters before I landed on Puff as my main.
Hmm.
And it was just something where talking about mains is very much having like a spiritual connection with the game. It's like you don't choose your main. Your main chooses you. And
Yeah.
how you perceive the game, how you perceive matchups, how you perceive playing against an opponent, and how you want to play is how a character will choose you. So Puff was the first character I started off with, and then from there, uh, I switched because I wanted to be Fox. I wanted to play Marth. I wanted to play Sheik, Doc, and
Hmm.
Falcon, and a bunch of other characters. And then I realized, no, the way that I play the game, the way that I want to play the game, is so indicative of how Puff is meant to be played. And then I realized, like, yeah, I'm so much better with Puff than I actually realized and what I thought.
Yeah. I think the when you brought up Mewtwo King, like he was the one that like diagnosed, or not diagnosed, but like dissected like all the frame data.
Hmm.
I think is it in the Smash documentary where they're talking about how he did that, and then Mango was like, "Oh, he always does the theoretical perfect option, so I know what he's gonna do before he does," and then he picks the dumb option that counters it. Was it
It's the
in this?
mango, dude. That's the
Yeah.
mango. That's in the documentary. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Yeah. I remember seeing that, and I was just like, "Yeah, that's insane." Uh,
Hmm.
so I
All
try
right.
to do that with Rocket League. What's the theoretical? All right, let's punish him for making the right choice.
I mean that is true because like especially you know in Rocket League relative to
Mhm.
Melee, it's like there are set of probabilities in terms
Mhm.
of like every single interaction and what you can expect. And I think what I love about Rocket League so much in why it was so easy for me to transition is because those probabilities in terms of the go-to interaction are
Mhm.
always changing, and then the I guess subversion of those becomes the norm. And then
Yeah.
you know it's a constant battle of how do you subvert the expectation of a interaction versus you know what will then become the norm kind of thing. And that's why I love it, and it just showcases why like the ceiling is continuously endless. Um, yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's like the smart thing becomes the dumb thing, and then the
Yeah,
dumb thing becomes the smart thing, and then the really dumb thing becomes the thing that wins you the world championship.
exactly.
Yeah,
Like psychos from across the pitch for
yeah,
some reason.
yeah. Like we were just like, oh yeah, you need to ceiling pinch double tap. Like
Yeah,
that's how you win. It's like,
yeah.
nah, that's freestyling stuff.
I mean, like
It-
look at the whole Zen
mhm.
his goal where he pre-jumped for the goal after
Oh
it
yeah.
was like a flub challenge or whatever.
Mhm.
In any world, that's stupid. You shouldn't be going for that. You should immediately be on the rotate back and like
Mhm.
supporting your team because you're in your back half and your teammate might get a clear, but it allows you to reset. But he's like, nah, I can make this.
Yeah.
And no one was expecting it, and it scored. So
I
brilliant.
think his teammate was expecting it because he launched that ball perfectly towards them. Who was it? Was that
That's true. That's
Alpha
true.
or was that
I can't
Radosin?
remember,
I want to say it was
but
Alpha.
and I think they might have put out a comm video, but
Mhm.
I haven't seen it. So
Yeah. So what would you say is like your favorite Rocket League series you've casted, and then what's your favorite Melee series that you've casted?
oh, hmm. My favorite Rocket League series I think that I've casted was hmm, that's a good one. My personal most fond memory of I guess casting in general, even though I'd say I probably had better moments, but it was near like early in my career is when I was casting for the Peeps back during the grid days when we still had the grid. And it felt like kind of regionals as we have them now, but it was just like a weekly thing. But they felt so intense to a lot of the teams that were coming through. Like they felt really high stakes. The Peeps at the time was Aleutian Gyro and AJ. And all of them were great, but it was a team that was pretty much a pickup team. They all kind of came
Yeah.
up around the same time, and so me and my mentor and the guy who really kind of got me into casting, Shope, we ran the Peeps stream. And it was the one time that he wasn't there, unfortunately, because he was sick. So I had to produce myself. And it was like 2020 week 3 of the grid. And it was the one time that everything just came into place for the Peeps.
Mhm.
Like this is when Gyro was like at his peak. Arguably, AJ was a monster, and Aleutian was still like really, really consistent. And it was the one time where just everything clicked, and Peeps ended up winning the whole thing. And we
Mhm.
were on stream on like the grid overtime stream that they had. It was like 20, 30, 40K viewers or whatever it was. I accidentally said shit on the stream because I was like,
Mhm.
holy shit, what is happening? Like it
Yeah.
was insane because they were going on such a run. Uh and that would be the team that would eventually get picked up by FaZe Clan. But it was like I was running this on my crappy computer, running a whole production. I was casting with Tugboat at the time, and that was like my first like big kind of moment as a caster. That really was one that I treasured a lot. I think going forward, like I always want to be able to like replicate a moment like that for like any team that I'm doing because like the guys were really grateful for that. We did an interview afterwards; they felt great. And yeah, that was just a little tidbit of like the early days of open era COVID
Mhm.
Rocket League that I think I really hold close.
Yeah, I remember making a very specific meme about their series against NRG.
Yeah.
Uh, cause it was have you seen the Scott Sterling video?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
it was Scott Sterling just like with because they made I think like what it was like 15 or 16 saves, like
Yeah,
almost like
because
a piece or
Gyro
something. Like
Gyro was like a defensive monster at the time, so he was just
yeah,
going crazy.
yeah. Like I remember watching it and it was just like shot,
But
save. So I took the face of Scott Sterling and the ball coming towards his face, and I was like the Peeps NRG,
yeah,
and
that was good energy
yeah,
too, man.
yeah.
Like the fact that we even were able to like compete at the time and
Mhm.
again, like that team ended up getting signed by FaZe, and they went on. That the team didn't last, I think, too long before like FK got put in, but it was still such a crazy time to
Yeah.
be like a Peeps fan.
I think like that we've kind of hit the era where like similar like I think we finally passed like the equivalent of like the Five Gods era. So
Yeah.
for Rocket League. For those of you that don't know, in Melee there's like the original, Kin, infamous Kin combo for all you Marth mains out there. But then there was the era of the Five Gods with Hungrybox, Mango. Trying to think, who else was there?
PPMD,
PPMD,
B2
B2 King,
Armada.
and Armada. Yeah.
Yeah.
And basically every single one of them, any tournament they touched, one of those five was winning it.
Yeah.
It's-
100% for like 3 years.
Yeah, quite the insane run for those five. So I think we've kind of had that where you had the teams that were always at the top, and now we're finally starting to get people that can compete at that level, and it's not a pure outclassing of them. It's really starting to come down to like the chess match that goes on, not just the not missing your wave dash or ledge stall.
Yeah, it's interesting because we used to have, our big three, like the NA big three, which is like NA, G2, C9. And that kind of petered off for a period as different, teams kind of waxed and waned. I think we ended up getting like a new generation of players that came through. In my opinion, I think it was like purely signified from like the Peeps winning DreamHack. I think that's when we had a hard stop where it's like, okay, we're getting a new generation of players in. And then after that, we got to see like FK come through, AJ, and all these guys. But yeah, like you mentioned, now it's there's no hard set just top team, at least in North America. In Europe, you could argue like we'll see how it goes with like quals. I still think like KC, Vitality, like they're still top. But I think in NA right now, especially now that like Furia, Complexity are gone, that it's going to prove to be a lot more volatile for like a lot of different teams, and people are just trying to figure out what the NA play style is to the point that we'll like succeed. We don't really have like any kind of gods as we used to, and if we do, it's more like our Doc Kid era, where like the people who grew up watching Squishy, Justin, Garrett, like these are the people who are going to be coming up and starting to dominate. And I think we're seeing that with like guys like Wavy coming through. I'm trying to think of some other rookies that are coming through, but like
Nas.
Kofor, Nas, yeah, like all these like young kids who are coming up now who have grown up on this previous Rocket League. That is our version of like the Doc Kid. So like the Melee equivalent would be like your Zane, your Cody's, like all those guys. And I think it just makes it a lot more interesting because it brings in fresh perspectives into the game. My big worry though that I have is I don't want it to be where we just see all of our old heads transition out, because I feel like a lot of Rocket League is stabilizing to the point where it is more like chess now than it is just straight out mechanics.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's something that I've been working on with a couple people. Like I've had a language to kind of like describe teams for a while in the way that they play. But when it comes to like talking or especially even on like the casting side of it, it's like, oh, they've got a really aggressive second man. It's like, okay, what does that mean? Is he just going for demos? Is he like positioning for a perfect 50 straight to him every time? Is he just never leaving the play and just always being an option? Like all of those things could be described as aggressive, but there's not much of a language to like describe that yet.
Yeah.
And so
no, as far as like casters, just like from a caster point of view, it's like a lot of the time we kind of see like generally how a player is playing. We can see just how aggressive they want to be, and by aggressive, that typically encompass like a lot of different things. It's they never want to leave the pitch. They're taking short rotates all the time. They are going for early challenges as much as possible, pre-jumping challenges, and doing everything they can to stay involved and be as much of a nuisance to their opposing team as much as possible. Whereas, you also hear casters describe players as passive, which is you're being more reluctant, you're hesitating, rightfully so in a lot of cases. Like you're waiting for the move to come through, waiting for the interaction at a later time where you feel like you have a better probability ratio to a positive outcome. And I feel like nowadays where like speed is such a big factor, I think we're going to see some teams try and and I think OG is a really good example of this, try and straight up just outdo speed with just good head play, really. And I think we saw it a little bit in the Leftover series, mainly because, they were struggling a little bit and they were getting caught in their own half and they were struggling with boost management a lot. But alternatively, every goal that they did do was entirely like communicated, well coordinated, perfectly positioned, and just good head play, more so than I think what Leftovers was able to provide. Still, they got away by the skin of their teeth. Regardless, that is kind of what is carrying OG through, and I hope that we get to see more of that, in this, upcoming regional. Though I think it is important to note, like, they are the one team that I think that's representing that the most, versus other teams who are just going pure speed, pure mechanics, and just pure like really good play. I think M80 is like a really good example of that, where it's like they have such good head play, but also just so much speed, aggressiveness, and pace that it's so difficult for teams to really match up.
Yeah, I would like to think I have at least a little bit to do with that, but
hey man, take your flowers. That's fine.
Yeah.
You're qualified.
Yeah. But no, like that's where I think I've been saying this for like the past 2 years. Like it's Rocket League has got to get to a point where you're thinking. I think when Jack came over to NA. That's when I knew like the writing was on the wall for be mechanical. Like because they came in, they were playing essentially what I called cover two, and they just completely swept teams in such convincing fashion because they were on the same page 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And like that alone is what carried them through their first regional.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree, because it was interesting that Gen G at the time, like, yeah, it wasn't the most mechanical team. It was just good reliance on team play more than anything else. Funny enough, like it reminded me a lot of like 2020 G2, where so much of what made G2 work wasn't like pure mechanics at all. Like Atomic was him, absolutely. But dude, like there's still that clip that was posted on Reddit where it's like it's like a four touch passing play at one point, and it's just like, how on earth like are you able to coordinate that like successfully? I think a lot of it just was a really aggressive first man that could get in like a good probing position. But yeah, I think if teams can achieve that consistently, that like level of like G2 and Gen G in those years, I think that just destroys teams. And it doesn't matter if you have speed or mechanics to like get your challenges. I just think it completely wrecks them in the consistency long run.
Yeah, like because as soon as if you know what your teammate's going to be doing, or like their job, so to speak, in a rotation, and you can play around that and you can have 100% confidence in it, and you have that for both players that are with you on the pitch. I mean, that's where I think Gen G was like the Mewtwo King of Rocket League, to just kind of continue this analogy, where they were playing perfect Rocket League, so to speak. But at the same time, that's when people started to be like, okay, well, if they're going to make the perfect decision every time, then we can predict that. And then FaZe came in and had their upset. I think it was like the next split.
Yeah, something like that.
It was either FaZe and then like version 1 came in and kind of did the same thing. But that's where I'm thinking, just like moving forward, just like how much of a chess match this esports about to become.
I mean, so much of it comes down to like, I want to see how EU plays the game. I want to see, like, NA is going through this right now. And I think I hold the personal belief that I think NA during the offseason got a lot better. And I think it's purely because of like consistency of events and just good like overall amount of hours played through these events. That has helped really huge on JamesBot for this, but also other events like Tactical Banditry and stuff. That it's helped to integrate the bubble a lot more because there's been so much exposure now to different play styles of different pickup teams and different players that I think it has forced a lot of the teams to adapt in ways that that might make them uncomfortable. I still think I don't see Gen G as being like the best team right now. I think we're gonna see Dignitas. I think we're gonna see M80. I think we're gonna see maybe less Shopify, but I think we're gonna see teams that were grinding a lot more during the offseason start to showcase themselves a lot more during the regular split. But that's also where I want to see EU because I want to know, since I think they've had a little bit less, like they've had some events, but not to the frequency that NA has. I want to know kind of what the progression has been like over these 5 months, because that's a long time.
Oh, yeah.
And I want to see kind of how that affects the top level for sure.
Yeah, I think it has less to do with everybody playing more and more to do with, hey, we've made it, so we need to solidify what it is we're doing now.
Yeah.
We don't have the time to experiment because we've got to play a tournament next week.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's what the off season has really done for the scene is it's not just giving the players a break, because for some of them it really wasn't much of one. But just having the chance to try things and not have to be, all right, I can spend 20 hours and we maybe get this new idea or we try out these things. And if we get it in these 20 hours, great. But we don't know if it'll even work.
Yeah.
But so like that just isn't incentivized with how dense and how competitive Rocket League was. So I think Verge talked about it on one of his podcast episodes that he was a guest on, where it's just like, yeah, it's like, hey, like this is great. Like I have some great ideas that I want to implement, but we've got to qualify, and so we need to solidify and do what we do best and focus in on that versus explore and add options to what we want to do.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
So I guess what would you say from watching outside of just like the mechanics? Because obviously those are going to get more consistent and crazier. What do you think has been like the most interesting thing you've noticed throughout the years of the meta, I guess you'd say? Like, have you noticed a point where like it cycles or...
Oh, yeah. I think it's... Rocket League is interesting because I think it's always been a pendulum between like... I would describe it as going like this, where it's like a loop, but it's going forward, right?
Yeah.
Because I think we've seen throughout the course of Rocket League where we've seen peaks and valleys of mechanical teams and then passing teams. Not even just so much passing teams, but more like team-based teams throughout both North America and Europe. And we see like, I think great example is what is it? 2022 World Championship, where we saw BDS who, yes, do they have mechanics? Absolutely. Seiko's a god, but are they so reliant on good mechanics to the point where you will see Seiko go for individual plays all the time? No. And I think they did that in their series. Are they the ones that beat Furia? Yeah, I think they were, right?
I think so.
Yeah. In their series against Furia, where it's like Furia, like, dude, like they're all mechanically so inclined, but they just tore them apart piece by piece through just good team play, like good communication. That's something that the French have that I think, is just they're gifted with for some reason. But we've also seen where individual mechanics has peaked. Phase winning is a good example of that. Like, I don't think you're going to get a ton of crazy good team plays off the fly from that. So it's always been really interesting to see those peaks and valleys, even going back in the day in NRG's, heyday with Justin and Garrett, but also going back with like Weedham Girls, where it was a completely different valley versus like Dignitas at the time. I think it will continue to be like that. That's the one motion you can expect in Rocket League throughout the course of its time as an esport.
Yeah, I think who was it? Method and a lot that scored probably the most insane double tap to ever be hit back in like
Yep.
season 2. Was it season 2 or season 3?
Are you thinking a double tap or the redirect?
I think it's technically a double tap because he set it up himself. I'm talking about the one where like he waterfalled it to himself and then jumped over the balls and fell down.
Yeah. No, that was sick. I think there's a lot of golden plays from back in the day that we could still learn from. Like I still think a lot's redirect is like still a top 10 absolutely. Shot ever. Like that thing's ridiculous. But getting that consistently, that's its own challenge, right?
Yeah.
Even in CRL, honestly, in CRL you see the same movement of teams. Yes, Northwood wins, but it's whether or not it's based on mechanics or team play. It's just Northwood's just good at both, which has made them successful. But the very few times that they've lost, it's usually been a good mix of just hard individual mechanics that they can't quite match on the day, like Columbia and with Cam and JD at the time. That's just some examples where you see even CRL follows that same pattern of just like peaks and valleys and different play styles.
Yeah. So what would you describe your personal play style as?
Not mechanically inclined. I tend to like really value just good pitch awareness more than anything. Like just like valuing where different players are and then valuing specifically challenges that can benefit your own team more than anything. Like if you're able, because I tend to think like challenges can be very predictable depending on how you play them, and you can go into a challenge in a very specific way and have it go your way in so many different cases if you're thinking about it. And having a challenge and playing off the challenge in a way where you can immediately transition into something, that's where like I like to play, but I'm also very bad at the game, so I don't, this means nothing.
Yeah, that's the hard thing, I guess. Whenever especially when you're solo queuing, is if you have a teammate that doesn't know how to read a challenge and they've watched like 1 or 2 YouTube videos, they're like, oh, second man plays to best case scenario. Best case scenario is I sit 2 feet in front of the net and they drop it on my hood. It's just like,
what are you doing? You're throwing. Yeah.
Or they've played long enough, or like they don't have mechanics, and so they're like, oh, they look at their teammate in front of them. I would miss that ball, so it's going to fall right behind me. And so they just sit 2 feet from their teammate behind them.
Yeah, and I mean, in solo queue, you just have to play and not trust your teammate at all.
Yeah.
That's the only way.
Which leads you to being a bad teammate, and
yes,
it's a vicious cycle. Yeah. It's such I guess that's what have you noticed that's like different between like the like ranked demons and the pro players? Like outside of just like the mechanics, but like just the way they view the game. Like,
I mean, because I've definitely casted like my fair share of bubble, right? And especially like in CRL, you also get like a bunch of ranked demons, and I think is because in ranked demons, like the main problem I think you'll find is just like the lack of communication ability. Like yes, there are communication skills, but it's like communication skills plus trust is the big thing. So much of it I think comes down to your initial thought, like your autopilot thought is not to go for just like a flip reset whatever, right? Your autopilot thought needs to be based off this interaction, how can I get my teammate involved? Because if I go for an individual play, more than likely, they have a counter to it. They will be able to get a challenge, and then we immediately transition out, right? Or if you do that, and if you can have that autopilot in, you're able to really think about, okay, based off where I am, do I really have a good chance at like getting it based off how I know myself and what, position I'm in to like play off, any touch. That's I think where what really separates like a lot of the just ranked demons versus um actual pro players is like the suppression of the ego. Essentially is you're suppressing your ability to the point where for the sake of the team, essentially, which is frankly the case for like all sports
Hmm.
in my mind, where the classics example is in basketball. You had Wilt Chamberlain, who was an absolute god in my opinion, one of if not the greatest players ever. I put him like top two, even though a lot of people don't, but I put him like top two. And I the only way he was able to win championships was by taking a step back and getting his team involved and following his coach.
Hmm. Yeah.
So and he was still a god, absolutely. He was still like scoring the most, but it was by taking a step back, recognizing where he's valued most on the court, was he able to win his championships with the Lakers. So honestly, and I think that's just a thing of maturing,
Hmm.
which probably will come most when like you at least get a little bit older, hopefully more than 13.
Yeah. What do you think when it comes to like that age and experience, what do you think is different between like growing up in the Rocket League scene versus growing up in like the Melee scene? Like the level of mentorship, like the community aspect, like what do you think Melee as a community is doing that the Rocket League community could learn from as a younger esport?
um it's kind of funny that you mentioned that, because I think literally one of the best parts about Melee is the fact that it is community based, right? And even though it's different now, and I still think this is a really bad thing for Melee, but to play Melee, you had to see people. You had to go to a place in person to get the best level of competitive experience. It taught you how to be socially responsible for the most part, right? You had to be on your best behavior. You had to kind of, for the most part, not be a tilt lord, or else you would get shunned by your community. You were taught how to act, but you're also taught how to communicate, right? It's a little different because I think, especially in Rocket League, you have to deal with teammates, you got to deal with, stuff. But you're forced to talk to people a lot more and interact with the community, therefore get to know people more. You get to get a feel off how people play just based off by playing them, right?
Hmm.
Um, you're playing with people all the time in Rocket League, but what kind of makes, I think, good teams generally is not the ones that are just filled with mechanical gods that can just do whatever, but it's the ones that have a good communication stance with each other. Um, I think a lot of Toronto, especially in the Melee community, really brought up each other as much as they did, themselves. Moki became a god partially through like Slippy, but also because he got the chance to play with really, really good players from the legacy Toronto scene, like Ryan Ford, um, just by coming to weeklies and coming to monthlies, regionals, Gommel, whatever, whenever he could. And that is, I think, the one thing that Rocket League lacks a lot, especially now with like the six man's dying, bubble, like scrims dying, everyone just relying on twos,
Hmm.
is the really close knit community where you can get that practice other than just rank twos. And I think it's going to affect the maturity and communication skills of the newer generation coming up a lot more.
Yeah, I think it's difficult with, or actually, I wonder how different the Rocket League community would be if voice comms worked in the beginning.
Weren't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like that's the great what ifs, because like most people don't start communicating with a teammate like outside of like need boost twice so they fake the kickoff to him. Like outside of that, it's really not until you've hit maybe Grand Champ, especially like the more competitive people, like maybe even SSL before like they actually get on a team and start to have to communicate.
Yeah, because even in ranked, like I'm chilling with Danger Talk all the time. Like
Hmm.
there's just a point, and he'll say it himself. There's just a point where like you cannot win consistently if you don't have comms because everyone's just queuing with each other. But how do you get to the point where you're adding people and you're doing it when you've never talked to that stuff, right? You never talk
Hmm.
to people. I've played so many different multiplayer games now that have had esports inclinations, and the decline of just the use of voice comms on a regular basis is a worrying prospect. Now there are some where you literally have to, like Valorant, your Counter
Yeah.
Strike, sure. League of Legends is mixed, but I think it really creates a kind of negative social culture that I
Hmm.
think hurts people in the long run because you are going to get, I hate to say it, but like you are going to get these socially inept 13-year-olds who just, or like 15-year-olds even, who just don't know how to communicate with people. And then they're going to get called toxic and then they're going to be shunned and stuff. And I'm like, what chance have they had to
Hmm.
really be able to develop those skills? It's why I really dislike the idea of the age being at 13 is because they don't have that many opportunities to develop real social skills with people. But now you want to thrust them into a position where they're going to be playing in front of how many thousands of people
Hmm.
trying to win how many millions of dollars, right?
Yeah. And then throw on top of that all the legal contracts and,
Yeah,
org
parents get involved,
obligations.
hopefully.
Hopefully, that's a that's something else that like I think moving forward, like when it comes to like signing like players and stuff like that, like I feel like there should be more requirements in the contract for the players, like not necessarily like content wise, but like scrim schedules, stuff like that. Like I think if the bubble orgs started to really see them as development contracts and be like, hey, like we're going to develop you, but for us to develop you, like you need to be doing these training packs. You need to be showing up to these replays. You need to have this attitude. You need to and start to integrate some of that professionalism. Uh, but I think we have
It,
to do that at the top first. But
yeah.
I don't know how inclined orgs are to do that, or even if that's common in esports in
It,
general.
the funny thing, it is common actually. The biggest trailblazer in that regard to really get that regimented setup, I think more than anyone else, is Astralis, like peak
Mhm.
Astralis in CSGO back in 2018, 2019. I've never seen a team be more regimented with not only their health, but their scheduling, what they're doing with their scrims and everything. Like everyone knows you got scrim blocks, whatever. It's what you
Mhm.
do with those scrim blocks.
Yeah.
But it was the preparation going into the matches that helped Astralis just they're the greatest CS:GO team of all time, right? Like
Mhm.
like no doubt about it. And so much of that was just done outside of the server rather than just in the server. Um, and I firmly think like that is where Rocket League hits a big dent is because we are the only esport that relies on 3 people, which creates this ebb and flow of I guess you would say like leverage
Mhm.
between people can just dip, go to another team or whatever, and like threaten to bring someone else with them. If anything were to go awry, like if there was anything too serious, they would be like, "Well, I'm just going to grab X player that's coming up, and we're just going to make another team because this team is ridiculous, right?"
Yeah.
You need to have fat contracts to be able to enforce that kind of thing and to get people to get into a regimented flow, do your packs as helpful as
Mhm.
they can be, VOD review, things like that. Which I don't know how many teams like are really doing. I know Bronskian, who you had a guest on here,
Oh
like
yeah.
he was really adamant on getting the VOD review going, getting like really good scrims in that were like really helpful, not just doing the motions. And it seemed to work out in a lot of cases, but that's a Rocket League problem for sure because any other esport just blows us out of the water when it comes to just good training and professionalism in the tier 1 level for sure.
Do you think that has to do with Rocket League being purely open qualifier? And like,
No. No, because I mean, like, listen, like Dota 2 is for the most part an entirely open qualifier sport, and you look at OG. Funny enough, they are super strict with what they want to do. They have the scrims, the VODs, everything because they have to. Like Dota is such a complicated game, and if you don't do that kind of thing, then you lose and you squash out. You don't make TI, right? Which everyone wants to make TI. So I think a lot of it is more of a culture thing than anything else. We got this big pickup culture that is created to teams just not lasting like at all, even throughout the course of like a single split or even a regional, right? Like how many teams just blew up after this qual, right? Like I that's why my advice, if ever OG or whoever team I'm casting for has like a really close game with like a bubble team, I'm like, don't break apart. Please stay together. Like that's the goal. Like not regain, go. No, it's like just stay together. That's the whole point. I wanted leftovers to just stay together after they almost beat us.
Yeah, that's the other thing too, is just like how quickly like blame gets put on one person.
All the time.
Or like, or not even one person, but like everybody just starts blaming each other.
There's no coach.
It's like, well, yeah. I mean, I think that's also like where Rocket League has really struggled. Is it has been, at least from most players' perspectives, is mental coach. Like you're just supposed to keep the head on our shoulders, and we know what we're doing, and we know this. There's not a. There hasn't been much of a respect for the tactical side of Rocket League yet. I think that's starting to change.
Yeah.
But like even with like my interactions on Twitter with like I'm trying to think who was Hogan Mode's coach?
Was it Nick or Adam Beggett?
Yeah,
I think it was Adam Beggett.
Like I was talking with him on Twitter or like Twitter messages, or not DMs, but like post or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just like, yeah, like my pro players, like they know every mistake they're making. And me coming at it more from an analyst perspective, I was just like, if they know it, then why are they consistently making like these 8 mistakes that are being punished consistently?
Yeah.
That was what I said in my head. I was a little more
respectful.
Yeah, respectful.
Yeah.
Or at least I hope it came across that way. It was just like, man, like there's more to this than I think some players have realized. But I think that's starting to.
I don't think I've seen, and this is because I work at the Score. I've been paying attention to esports for a very long time. I don't think I've seen a role. I tweeted about this a while ago too, when some cuts happened. I've never seen a role as disrespected as a coach in Rocket League.
Mm-hmm.
It's to a point where it's pretty gross, because I definitely have seen pretty good and pretty effective coaches get cut simply to just sign an ex-player who's transitioning to coach. And they immediately will take the marketing value over that player than a coach that has a very, very proven record. Chrome is a great example. He is such a good coach, but when he has gotten cut for such dumb reasons to be replaced by whoever, I'm not dunking on any player, coach, or anything like that, but I don't think just because you're a player, that means you're a good coach. A coach is not a player-centric position. It is a people-centric position. And that is where some of the effectiveness like comes in most, along with having a good analytical mind. And it's not a case in any other game, not CS, not Dota, not League, not Valorant, not Apex, not COD. Only in Rocket League will you find a disrespected role that you could have a multi-split winning performance throughout the course of a season and still get cut when it's not your fault.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be like dropping Potter from EG, because I'm sorry, you've dropped out of the top 100 in AIM Labs. We've got to let you go. Like that's how like ridiculous like some of the like arguments all are.
It's why there's actually been, I think, like an influx of coaches going into the collegiate scene,
Mhm.
is because you're not at the beck and call of just three teenagers.
Yeah.
You have an institution over your head that trusts in elderly and like mature experience more than
Mhm.
anything, and therefore will back you up, will support you to be able to, manage a team and get actual coaches like coaching duties done, which I'm experimenting with. I'm not going to claim I'm a coach or anything like that, but I am like going to be sitting with like teams at the collegiate level to like try and analyze gameplay, do some review,
Mhm.
really kind of talk them through of like what do you think you did wrong here, kind of thing, and then like try and work with them as people first. But we've seen like the influx of coaches even into the women's scene too, where
Mhm.
it's like they can have a bit more authority, sort of thing. So I hope that at some point orgs will like try and support the coach a lot more. I don't want to bring up Roldiz, but he's the biggest example of when
Mhm.
he got cut. So yeah, that's just a sensitive topic for me. Like that whole like the disrespect towards coaches in Rocket League is insane.
Yeah, it was a. I hope he doesn't mind me sharing this because it was kind of a funny story. So I ran into Roldiz like I think like 2 or 3 weeks later in Valorant, uh, just like unrated.
That's
Uh,
crazy.
yeah, yeah,
What
and I was just like,
a
man,
coincidence.
like you kind of sound like Roldiz. And he was just like, oh wait, like how'd you know it was me? And like we were just like, oh yeah, like Rocket League scene. There's not that many of us. Uh, but then like we got to the like towards the end of the game and like he's making good call outs and like stuff like this. He's like, hey, like we need to do this or we should do this. And we end up losing after like a teammate just like straight up ignores what he says and does the opposite.
Yeah.
And uh he was just like, man, like I don't know like what we should do or like this is like BS or whatever. He was kind of getting tilted. And I was just like, hey man, like you should be used to your players not listening to you. And he just he did the typical like the rolled his bro stop. And just but yeah. Uh,
Yo, dude, not like that, man.
uh,
Oh no.
yeah. It
Poor
was
guy.
yeah, he was laughing after that like but like like that's the weird thing about being a coach too. Like is how hard it is to get respect, but I think it's also because we give respect to a lot of coaches who don't necessarily deserve it too.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there's I can't count how many people that I've seen be like, "Oh yeah, they coached a rank A team." It's like, "Cool, how'd they do?" As good as a rank A team should. It's just like, "So what did he do?" It's like,
Yeah, I guess yeah, that is like one of the biggest points is like how do you track like tangible performances to like coach, right?
yeah.
Um, which I think is like really difficult because I think even if you get into the analytics as a coach, I
Mhm.
still don't think that brings like immediate results.
Oh
I
yeah.
think the only thing that a coach can do in the immediate is a change in headspace more
Mhm.
than anything else, like a change in environment, a change in headspace, and change in habit. But I don't think like as a coach, like you can expect just immediate result because it takes a long time to
Oh yeah.
change like core habits of a team. Um, so like that's why it's so hard to just track performance, and therefore because it's so ambiguous,
Mhm.
coaches are the easiest ones to cut.
Yeah.
um yeah, it is unfortunate, but it's also because Rocket League in general is very an ambiguous sort of game. Like yes, we have a ton of stats, but nowhere to the lengths of like a CS or a Dota or whatever, where you can track people and how they're doing over the course of time to a T in
Mhm.
almost every single interaction. As Rocket League, it's a bit more complicated. There's a bit more variances involved, so it just becomes very difficult.
Yeah. I think that that's where as we get more into like the tactical side of things and like systems become at least more talked about. Like right now, like a lot of the systems and way we coach, like everybody's like kind of keeping it under the belt. Like that's kind of
Yeah.
like a secret to like the really top teams. Uh, is like everybody knows what they're supposed to do, so it's very easy for the coach to be like, hey, look, like this, we agreed that X needed to happen, so Y could happen, so Z could happen. If something else happens, like this is our structure,
Yeah.
for the most part. Like protocols, triggers, and executes, like for Valorant or any other attack shooter.
Yeah.
There's levels to that at the pro side. So like with that, it's very easy to be like, okay, like, is it the strategy or is it the player?
Yeah.
But as that mindset is like not very, it hasn't traveled down to the bubble scene. Like I don't even think it's fully infiltrated the pro scene outside of maybe EU, because they just kind of have, they're the ones that really started it with BDS.
Yeah, I think culturally they just have a bit more respect for coaches. From what I can tell, like a lot of coaches that are in the bubble scene, like, and this isn't to disrespect any coach, but it doesn't feel like coaches are as integrated as much as they could be. And a lot of the time, it feels like coaches are just along for the ride of pickup teams.
Yeah.
Which, and that might be unfair to say because I don't know the circumstances of all these teams. But at least that's just kind of what it feels like based from what I'm getting from the comms of different bubble teams, from how I guess they're coming up. I can still see like rarely do I see like a team that's come together and you see a coach's tangible effect on a team, where the individual styles that you would see from the individual players are muted and you see it more as like a holistic team experience. I think that's just the case of, bubble still trying to develop a lot more. But I think that's just, it continues the problem of like NA just having more of an ego issue than EU does. Therefore, EU is more willing to play as a team kind of thing, and why they just completely bop NA right now. So it's just a symptom, I think.
Yeah. I think moving forward, what do you think the scene needs to get to that next level? Like outside of just the gameplay, but like what does the players, what do the coaches, what do the fans need to do to give this esport the success and longevity that Melee has been able to do? Or
I think Rocket League will always have the longevity of Melee, in my opinion. I think like the game is too unique for it to die, right? It fits such a niche that it can't really be replicated in any other way. And I think you'll always get the grinders that are contributing to it. To get a change in like the culture so that we can have like that sort of community and like professionalism, I will always out myself as one of the proponents that I think we should have league play. But also we need to have RLRS back. I think that is such an important factor for the development of players, development of bubble teams. Like, dude, do you know how many like minor tournaments and minor tournament circuits there are in like CS and Dota?
There's like insane. Yeah.
There's ones that you haven't even heard of, right?
There's like 3 or 4 a day.
Huge.
There's like 3 or 4 a day.
There's so many different leagues that you go through, but like you look at the support of leagues, not just from the general community, but from the players themselves. They're just not as contributed to the extent, right? Everyone's going for RLCS quals. That's great. It's awesome that people are like going for it. But just imagine if we had like an RLRS where it was like a weekly thing and you had to show up every week. You knew your opponent, so you had to prepare for your opponent. And every single time you had a one goal that you were looking at, beat your next opponent, right? Your coach is getting VOD review. You're prepping towards VOD review. You're doing and prepping your play style. It's those intangibles that I think a lot of people forget when they're talking about what league play adds to the modern Rocket League space, is how it affects the mental of individual players, coaches, organizations, from a week-to-week basis. I think a much more structured route is so much better. And if not just a structured route, then a circuit of tournaments where you have that consistency of what to prepare for. Because so much of the time, especially during these 5 months, people have no idea what they're actually playing the game for. They're just like, what am I playing? Maybe the draw, maybe tactical banditry, maybe, and then if I qual, what do I do, right? Like it's so up in the air. So more just clear pathing, clear direction of what people need to be doing, I think creates so much more structure and therefore can develop and organically so much easier.
Yeah, I think it helps with storylines too.
Of
Like,
course.
like the one thing I will say I love about this format is how simple it is to follow
Mhm.
compared to previous years.
That's true.
Um,
Yeah, the grid days. Oh boy,
yeah,
that was so impossible to follow at times.
yeah, like that. Especially like with the seating and stuff too, and the way they did that, like that was so needlessly complicated. So as bad as I think some of the seating decisions were this year, at least at the start, like the better teams got to where they needed to go. Like
Yeah,
there
generally. I
wasn't,
think we got the expected outcome.
yeah, there wasn't anybody in, I would say, top 32 that really shouldn't have been there. Like
Yeah.
top 64, I think there was like maybe one or two teams that, nah, but
Yeah.
they got out pretty quickly. And I think that has just more to do with NA doesn't have a 64 teams of depth yet.
Definitely top 32.
Yeah.
That day 3 call was insane.
Oh yeah. I was sad that Boise State and Plot Twist had to play each other to qual.
Oh, that was so upsetting, dude. I would have so been down for a CRL team to make top 16, man. We would have popped off.
Oh yeah. Like
Ugh.
Waiting is
I'm glad Sosa made it. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
glad Sosa made it because Sosa's the boy. He's Canadian. We need another one in there. But yeah, Boise would have been sick.
Yeah. So like I consider McNando a friend. Waiting, he's more of an acquaintance right now, but we're friendly. I messaged both of them like when I saw they had made it, and I was like, "Hey, yeah, congratulations! Like, I hope to see you guys in Swiss." And then the next day, like, I looked at the bracket, and I was like, "Dang it, they got to play each other."
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, it was brutal, dude.
Yeah.
And they were both good. Like they were both had the possibility to like make it through. Plot Twist especially, like they were up in their games against NRG. Like they were taking it to them. Yeah, it was a 3-0, but it was a very hard fought 3-0.
Yeah.
I think coming down to it, I think NA is actually super deep. I think they are very deep. Looking at how many of those games went to best of 5 was insane. OG had 2 in a row. There were so many different outcomes that could have happened. Omelette not making it was huge.
Yeah, that I think is like out of all the teams to like get upset, that was not like one I was expecting.
Yeah.
Like I was expecting honestly Muffin Men to get upset more than any other team, at least based off of seeding.
I love Squishy, but me too.
Yeah. But I'm happy he's made it. He gets his final run in before he retires. But when he said that, like my thought was, okay, he's doing one content run, and
Decent.
a team will pick him off like towards the end, and he'll have his farewell. But that was not the Omelette team. Like it's a really good team. Like they've made top 8 a few times. Like
they were pretty
not
good.
Easy to do.
They were pretty good. And I don't think this will be the end for them, but they just got unlucky with the draw.
Oh yeah. Like that was, they got the death bracket pretty much is what happened.
Poor dudes.
So
they were actually up for the TSM spot.
Really?
Yeah, TSM were looking at both Hey Bro and Omelette as they were. And they went with Hey Bro, but yeah, they were both up for it. Yeah.
Like I said, like that slightly different bracket, and they make it. Like that's the only thing that I think really needs work is like our seeding. Like there has to, in the perfect
900
world,
teams,
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Like in a perfect world, like I think at least because they want it to be inclusive, but I think like we just need to have a club queue finally be in the game, like similar to like a Premier League, And just like, if you haven't had RLCS results before, like go play this, and then one, it encourages people to actually be a team and not do pickups.
Yeah.
I don't think pickup teams should be allowed to just sign up and play, because it just makes the seeding that much more difficult.
Oh yeah.
Like, I think like you have to at least do like 10 placement matches as a team, you know?
Yeah.
Like, have something dedicated that is you and your team are ranked in this leaderboard, and then if you sign up for all CS, it's based off of that leaderboard, and it's clear like, okay, like you guys wanted to play, you guys take this seriously, cool, like you get a higher seed.
Yeah. No, I tend to agree, but I don't know. I also like it when random teams just come up out of nowhere. Like it's always really fun.
Yeah. But I don't know. That's the balance between content and competitive integrity that you have to balance, as well as practicality.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially like our admin team tries hard, especially with seeding. Like they do their
yeah.
best, and mistakes are going to happen. People are going to complain. People are always going to complain about seeding. I don't think I've ever seen a season where people haven't complained about seeding.
Yeah. I mean, when we're getting this many more teams, like I think it has like the similar issue like with ranked. Like ranked was fairly good before free to play happened, and then they made like a few small changes. The population size doubled, and the system they had in place for 0.1% of new players each month to get sorted properly into the ranks faster, it just got overwhelmed, and then now ranked is where it's at.
Ranked is ranked.
Yeah.
Love you, ranked.
So like I think like the seeding, just because ranked has that issue, that's why I don't like using, I don't think ranked should be the deciding factor if we can do anything else to make that happen.
No, it's difficult because I think there's different. I kind of just want to say like screw it. I think the good teams are going to make it regardless of seeding. But until some crazy upset happens, like one of the top teams gets knocked out in like top 64, I don't think anything's going to really change.
Oh no, the 15th seed didn't even make top 64.
Yeah, well, tough.
Yeah, like that's the weird thing is like, and everybody kind of saw it coming for what it was worth. It's just like, hey, look, like I think we were all surprised they didn't make it to at least top 64, but
a little bit
at the same time, like
they were also, I think, a little bit overseeded. I love Jay, but a little overseeded,
Yeah. So I guess what's next for you? So you said you work at the esports score. We've talked about Rocket League, Melee.
Yeah.
What is it that you are doing?
Right now, I mean, my main focus, kind of going forward, is just going to be obviously CRL if that comes around. Focusing as much on collegiate as possible, as well as supporting OG and like really doing my best, because I've never been as invested in a team as I have OG. I'm so happy they're in the sport. And the OG guys like are really happy with what we've been able to provide, and I'm just supporting the team as much as I can. And just honestly, there's so many new opportunities I think coming through the course of this new season that it obviously makes a ton of room for new content through the score. And I'm very happy to see where that goes. But I think it's just now that we have our LCS again, there's so many new ways to see the sport, so many new narratives that I'm just excited to be able to cover them in any capacity, whether it's casting or content. That's kind of what I'm just most excited to. Obviously, like with college, that is like my bread and butter. That is my soul and my joy. But we haven't gotten anything from that yet. So in the meantime, our LCS is where it's at. It's just the goat of esports right now, and it feels nice to be back despite all the tragic stuff we've had to go through. But that's kind of where it's just been. I'm very looking forward to see what we're going to get in the next year. So
yeah, I think this was definitely This is almost like the exact same format as like the original RLCS, like
Almost,
the
yeah.
very first time.
Very
I
first
think the
one.
only thing different is like there's a Swiss stage
Yeah, and
and there's
I
more regions, but
yeah, and there's more
yeah.
regions, which that's also very exciting.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited to see how these regions develop too. It's been interesting seeing them develop over time, but I think come the first LAN, whenever it's announced, hopefully in North America,
Hmm.
um, that they're gonna bring some new sauce for sure. I think.
Yeah. Blast, they have a good record for their production, to say the least.
Yes, I'm very excited for a Blast production. I think I've seen NCS grow, and I
Hmm.
think they're only going to get better and better. That's why I'm so excited.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to it. So,
They have to announce it soon. I got to buy my ticket.
yeah, it's like we need to know where it's coming to. So,
I hope East Coast. I hope East
oh
Coast so
yeah,
bad,
dude.
dude. We
Dude,
need
I've
an
been
East
saying like,
Coast.
as crazy as it may sound, like I think Arkansas is like the perfect place for it. We've got an international airport. We've got like a
That too.
30,000 person stadium. Everything's cheap here. Like,
Oh, but you know what's crazy?
mhm,
Toronto. Should have it in Toronto. That'd be
yeah,
great.
yeah, or
Europeans can get
both.
in easy. It'd be
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah. We've got two of our players in Toronto right now because of that.
Wait, really?
Yeah, that's where
Oh, is it?
NASA and Norris are right now.
Dude, I should treat him to ramen.
Yeah.
I'll poach your players. uh,
Well, yeah. Well, hey, it's been a really fun time. I've got your link tree in the description if you guys ever want to go check them out. The esports score, I'm pretty sure you guys have seen a few of their suggested videos. Definitely go and check them out. They've just did an amazing documentary on Zen. I guess,
I'm doing my best to bring Rocket League to the score for sure.
yeah, bring it to the world for us.
Yeah.
But yeah. Is there anything else that you want to talk about, or anything to sign
I,
off on?
I think like besides just hope you guys support OG. I hope you guys keep supporting Rocket League. Follow the Twitter if you can. That's always really nice. Support CRL. CRL, it is very underrated. You don't get to see teams switching after a single tournament. And you get to see, I think, a different side of Rocket League that you don't often get to see. One that's a bit more mature, one that's still very high level. I mean, there's so many CRL players currently in RLCS right now. So definitely check out CRL, support the boys that are coming up. Obviously support M80. They're huge, and I'm looking forward to see their performance. And yeah, no, I'm very happy we got to do this.
Yeah. Well, hey, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much, dude.